Pelicans are these big-billed, pesky birds who aren't really known for how lovable and elegant they are, like, say, swans. In fact, these birds are really weird. One thing about them is that they're super ambitious and will try to eat anything they can get their hands on. Just take a look at these disproportionately large animals that they try to chomp on. These opportunistic feeders have a wide palate and a wide beak for that matter. But their brains aren't as big as their beaks, hence all these goofy pelican moments caught on camera. When they're not busy yawning in a way many consider plain rude, they're busy stealing other animals and people's food, all the while scooping up live pigeons with their beaks. Yup, stick around to find out why even pigeons have just about had it with pelicans. Before we move on, subscribe to the Forever Green channel and hit that bell icon so you never miss a single upload from us. Without further ado, let us show you several other reasons why animals, birds, and even humans hate these majestic creatures. They don't store food in their pouch on their bills. One of the most unsettling things about pelicans is their fibrous pouch that we often refer to as their bill. It's actually called their gullar sac, and most people think it's for storing food, but that's not true. Otherwise, they would have had bad breath and an awfully unattractive anatomy. These pouches are mostly for capturing food. Depending on what they eat, which is almost anything, their bills can expand and contract. When they first catch their prey, it's more of a soup than a meal in their beaks with all the water they accidentally carry too. How pelicans yawn. It's normal for a lot of animals to open their mouths wide and yawn. Pelicans do it too, but they look even worse than we do. For a while, the internet thought they used to push out their spine to cool off. But the truth is, birds cannot eject their internal organs in any case. Sure, it's not a pretty sight, but avoid believing anything you see on the internet. When they yawn, they move their head back and do a really big stretch on their necks and bills since it's made of flexible tissue. The weird misinformation always starts with pelicans because they're really unusual creatures and there isn't much research being done on them. Could be because they're so inhospitable. Pelicans try to eat huge prey, plus diet, plus mating habits. The reason other animals might hate them is because of the way they hunt. Pelicans fly low over the water, then plunge into the water. They can't swim very well, but their pouches are made of close-packed, soft fibers that push out the water in one direction when they hit it. This creates a pocket of air in front of them, which they use to avoid sinking while they scoop up fish with their beaks. They can swim well enough for this trick to work. If you thought this was pure madness, wait till you see them during mating season, when their crazy inner animal comes out. They become so aggressive that even hippos avoid getting near them during those 3 months of the year because no matter how hungry those monsters might be, pelicans will attack. Hippos may weigh as much as 3 elephants, but it's hard to forget an angry pelican with its dangerous beak within striking distance. Eating habits. Their eating habits are the worst, which is why they're not liked by humans too much. Their worst habit has to be the way they drool. Every single one of these creatures eats with their mouth open, which means they are constantly drooling while eating. Because who cares if your whole face becomes wet while trying to get a bite out of that hot dog? Not going to be an issue for you anyways because you're not human. We should also mention that you would think this would make it difficult for them to catch fish, but no, it actually helps in this regard due to their extremely long bills. This way, the water flowing over their mouth doesn't inhibit catching prey at all. Pelicans stealing food. Pelicans are pesky little creatures and will gladly steal others' food. Why, you may ask? Well, because they're jerks, that's why. Other than that, they have no moral compass and will snatch anything edible they like from a member of their own family or from us. American white pelicans usually hunt for fish in small groups, which helps in driving the fish into shallow water. However, there's always a few of them that straight up just steal fish from their other fellow birds. Whatever happened to birds of a feather sticking together? Sometimes they also rob seagulls and cormorants of their dinner. The worst part is, even humans aren't safe from their grabby little bills. Pelicans are also known for their massive appetite, so much so in fact that they can eat up to 5 pounds of fish in one single meal. Furthermore, during mating season, pelicans use their loud honks to attract other members of the species. Sadly enough, though, these animals lack any moral compass and will use this method to trick other birds into thinking that something's wrong with them. They do this by honking loudly when there isn't anything close by, which usually does the trick unless said bird is extremely smart or actually needs help, in which case these sneaky buggers will even try harder to sound like an individual. When a gull is tricked into coming near, the pelican will then jump and try to eat said gull. The gull, however, is very smart and will immediately fly away. The pelican then waits for the gull to land, or if it gets too close, to try to bite its head off. This isn't without consequences though, since throwing their massive body around has caused many of them to break their wings, which calls for surgery even when they're treated by humans. Pigeons have had it with pelicans. Poor old plain pigeons don't really have too many predators chasing them, but pelicans have decided to fill that position. Pigeons are the sort of creatures that don't know how to fight back because their predators are mostly electric wires at best. Other than that, their fighting skills are pretty much non-existent, especially after the incident at the St. James Park a few years ago. A pelican swooped by a bunch of pigeons and swallowed one whole. Completely alive, too. They must not be fun at Thanksgivings. Not just that, this unfortunate pigeon is being digested alive with stomach acid because evolution decided that pelicans should simply not have teeth. If you thought the living dining ended there, you'd be wrong. Pelicans are very curious creatures with a huge palate for blood and thirst. We meant for different foods. Usually these foods are live creatures. Either pelicans skipped a huge step or forgot about the hunting party during the hunting process. When researchers came to know about this behavior, they acknowledged the fact that it isn't normal at all. Duh! As bad as pelicans might sound, they're not doing it for attention either. It might just be that their behavior is changing due to so much exposure to people and the urban lifestyle. But who knew the urban lifestyle could be so cruel? This just keeps getting worse, and we can't keep defending these guys. With no moral compass, you can only imagine what happens. Pelicans have always been keen on eating baby birds too. What happened to birds of a feather stuck together? Considering these birds have been around for about 40 million years, they're doing something right. If it weren't for their giant pouch, they would have been dead, gone, and buried by now. Their fearlessness and absolute havoc-wrecking energy is very similar to that of dinosaurs, which makes sense when you realize they're direct descendants of the Pterosaurus. But there have been fossils of the prehistoric Pterosaurus that suggest they had the same pouches and even the same flying style. Well, these birds are clearly honoring their ancestors by absolutely being the worst version of themselves. The American white pelican grows a temporary horn. As if their anatomy wasn't one of a kind already, the American pelican can grow a sort of horn. It's not really a horn though, just a flap of skin that grows on the front of their beak. It actually serves two functions. First of all, it helps them gather fish quicker by scooping water in this way. It's also used to intimidate their foes, especially during mating season. This horn can grow up to 20 centimeters long, and they've been known to use them against animals as large as bears or coyotes, which is why so many animals hate pelicans. They're one of the few species that has no natural enemies besides man, who hunts them for sport mostly. Albeit, if you corner one, you'll be facing off against an animal whose bill is capable of delivering 2 tons of pressure per square inch, and they're not afraid to use it. Like we said, they aren't scared of much, and their beak is what we'd call a weapon in most cases. Aggressive pelicans. By now, you clearly know how aggressive these winged creatures from hell can get. However, do you know why they get so aggressive? Well, it's only natural. You see, when they were forced to live in an area where they can't hunt, the animals will get increasingly more aggressive towards humans and other creatures. One of these animals once entered a house to try and kill one of the said inhabitants. We know what you're thinking, but how does that make them notably aggressive? Doesn't mean they'll go out looking for trouble though. What else do we need to know about them? They have their own language, which consists mainly of loud honks with some squawking. Wouldn't that be a treat for our ears to hear? Pelicans on boats. It wasn't always like this. Humans and pelicans were once really good friends. In fact, captains and crews used to catch some potential fish. The deckhand would be sent to the highest point of the boat and tell the crew where most of the activity occurs. Since pelicans fly high above the horizon and dive down to a whole school of bait, the tactic of theirs would be an easy way to detect where most of the fish were. Now we have ultrasound technology and has a lot of other ways to find fish, so pelicans aren't so important anymore. Pelicans get dizzy. Perfect. With so many tricks up their wings, you would expect them to be very witty and smart. Well, they're not that smart. In fact, at times, they can be seen flying around and around in circles over the same area in the sky. Usually this means they're waiting for fish to come into their reach before diving in and scooping up some lunch. When executed perfectly, we have to give pelicans a big up for their hunting technique. Did you know the excessive circling causes them to get dizzy and fall from the sky occasionally? Talk about self-sabotage. Just goes to show how funny these animals are. Bad sleeping habit. While most other birds lie on their bellies while they sleep, pelicans choose to make them look bad by standing on their feet while they're sleeping. Look at me, I can sleep while standing. This peculiar sleeping habit makes them vulnerable to attacks from only true predators, humans. But they know they can count on the powerful strikes of their bills to save themselves or at least go down with a fight. This ability can be attributed to their superior leg strength and ability to keep their heads safely cushioned in their wings. Their influence in Christian art. It was once believed in medieval Europe that whenever food was scarce or famine struck, mother pelicans would intentionally stab themselves on the breast with their beak and feed their offspring with the blood. While this is a totally commendable act of vampirism and cannibalism, it was just a myth that has something to do with the gullar pouches of Dalmatian pelicans, which transform to an orange-reddish color during the breeding season. It may have been that an onlooker saw one preening and got the wrong idea. That being said, the myth of pelicans feeding their chicks with blood struck a chord with the Christian artist, who compared the gesture to Jesus' sacrifice made on humanity's behalf. Therefore, the motif became popular in Europe during the late medieval and early Renaissance periods. In fact, there was a 1611 edition of the King James Bible that featured the image of a breast-piercing pelican. It almost appeared in a 1575 portrait of Queen Elizabeth I. So you can see that they've not only been perceived as having blood-sucking chicks, but also have had the medieval Christians fooled. Weird ability. In addition to their absurd feeding habits and an insatiable taste for food, pelicans have a weird ability that just about sums up what they are. Pelicans have nostrils, but for some reason, evolution feels they should breathe through their mouths instead. This is a trait common to all 8 of the species. Their nostrils are sealed off, buried under their beak's horny sheath. However, this doesn't mean that their nasal cavities are functionless. The hidden nostrils house special glands responsible for removing excess salt from the bloodstream. Their lives depend on this trait as pelicans and other maritime birds ingest a considerable amount of salt water. As a result of their walled-off and clogged-up nostrils, which contain desalinizing glands, pelicans can now boast of breathing through their mouth. I don't think that would go down too well with birds and other animals that breathe through their nostrils. It seems nature just chose to give pelicans an unfair advantage over other birds. They refuse to stay extinct. Just when the world thought that they got rid of these species of obnoxious birds, they somehow found a way to revive their dying species. The brown pelicans have made a comeback over the past 50 years after an insecticide known as DDT almost wiped them out. During the 1950s and 1960s, this insecticide infested whole food chains. After farmers sprayed them on crops, it was consumed by earthworms, and runoff saw to it that fish got a dose as well. Consequently, these animals were transferring the various birds that ate them. Although the insecticide didn't kill many birds directly, it resulted in softer eggshells. As a result, the population of many bird species, brown pelicans most notably, took a hit. This became a problem that snowballed into the disappearance of the brown pelican in vast swaths of the U.S. In 1938, 5,000 breeding pairs of brown pelicans were counted in Louisiana alone. But after the incident, not a single brown pelican sighting was recorded within the state. Similar declines were also recorded in Texas. However, since that time, the brown pelicans miraculously reversed their once gloomy fortunes. They went from being endangered across all states by 1970 to just a handful of states by 1985, before being completely taken off the list by 2009. Now, we're not saying that we're in support of what happened to the pelicans and all the other birds that were affected by the insecticide, but at least we'd have one fewer pelican species to worry about. Webbed outcast. Another reason birds don't like pelicans is that they choose to be different, an interjection between two different bird species. Let me explain. Water birds tend to have 4 toes on each foot with some degree of webbing, but in birds like geese and ducks, the webbing is only present between the 3 front pointing toes. There's no webbing connected to the 4th toe, which is usually small and oriented in the opposite direction. But of course, pelicans aren't like every other water bird. They have what is referred to as a totipo made feet, which in simple terms means that on each foot there's webbing that connects all 4 toes and they all face the same direction. The only other birds with this kind of arrangement are gannets, cormorants, and boobies. Their parenting practices. Hate them all you want, but most pelicans have excellent parenting practices. Both parents are responsible for raising their kids right from the egg phase to full maturity, much like we humans, except in a few cases, of course. Right from the point where both pelicans agree to mate, they share the burdens of raising a family. They both search for nesting material, take turns incubating the eggs, and provide food by regurgitating for their hatchlings. They even perform post-fledgling duties to their chicks for as long as 18 months. Isn't that so sweet? Interestingly, this show of love and affection only lasts for a mating season. As soon as the chicks are fully fledged, the male abandons his newly formed family to form a new one with another female. And this promiscuous cycle never ends. Troublesome hatchlings. Apparently, pelicans are just as much trouble to their parents as they are to humans and birds alike. Generally, when a pelican lays a clutch of 2 to 3 eggs, 95% of them make it to adulthood. The other 5%, they don't as a result of sibling competition or siblicide. Imagine having kids that gang up to kill the sibling they consider the weakest. Yep, those are the kind of kids pelicans are. Furthermore, before, or in most cases, after a pelican chick has been fed, it throws a tantrum by making loud noises and dragging itself around a circle by one wing and leg, hitting its head on the ground or anything it finds nearby. And this tantrum can escalate to something that looks like a seizure that results in the chick falling briefly unconscious. Kind of like having a kid who plays dead right after you feed him. Horrific. Although researchers can't establish the reason behind these antics, it's a common belief that they do it to draw attention to themselves and away from other siblings who are wanting to be fed. Couldn't they have just asked nicely? They are everywhere. Another annoying fact about these birds is that they're everywhere, on every single continent of the planet. The only place you won't find these obnoxious birds on the planet is Antarctica. They are found throughout the warm regions close to inland or coastal waters. So basically, a pigeon is left to choose between tolerating the pelican and flying all the way to Antarctica to avoid being a lunch snack. You agree, the former is the more feasible choice, and that's pretty unfair, even for humans. Feeding their chicks. When pelicans feed their chicks, they often literally swallow their heads. Once the feeding frenzy starts and the mother pelican decides to feed her chicks, rather than regurgitate some food as it is used to when it was a hatchling, it grants it access to her esophagus. The chick's head could be buried in its mother's head between a few seconds or a couple of minutes. The sight is not only disgusting, but it's also scary to watch. What if the chick is suffocated? What sort of mother feeds her baby this way in the first place? After spending time in the mother's throat, the chick would have a stomach full of food or bad breath. Mating Ritual, Part 2. In addition to their aggressive behavior during the mating season, pelicans don't mess around when it comes to finding a mate. More often than not, the females gather in a nesting place, waiting for the ideal male to come along. And when the right guy comes along, he simply approaches the female he fancies and begins to poke it with his beak. walk in front with a low murmur, and sometimes rub his beak against hers. But in cases where the mating ritual takes place outside of the nesting colony, it's the female that approaches the male to choose a partner. Kind of like going after men after you discover you're not getting any younger and need to have kids. In addition, the mating proper starts almost immediately after a partner is found, and they begin to make plans for their family. Alright, comment below what you think about pelicans. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to Forever Green. And hit that bell icon so you don't miss another funny animal video. We'll see you in the next one.